Live from London, this is BBC News. Iran acknowledges that serious damage was done to its nuclear facilities during the US and Israeli bombings. Washington approves $30 million of funding for a controversial US and Israeli-backed group set up to deliver aid in Gaza. A massive climb down. The Prime Minister caves in to Labour rebels over changes to the benefits system. And a Norfolk teenager becomes the first patient in Europe to receive a potential cure for a rare immune disorder. Hello and welcome, I'm Laxmi Gopal. The US Defence Secretary has called the recent strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities the most complex and secretive in military history, but he gave few new details about their impact. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has now acknowledged what he called serious damage from the strikes, saying an assessment was underway, but he disputed President Trump's assertion that there would be US-Iranian talks next week, saying no such plan had been set. Our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette is in the Iranian capital Tehran. She's being allowed to report from there on condition that none of her coverage is used on the BBC's Persian service, which broadcasts to the people of Iran. This law from the authorities applies to all international media agencies operating in Iran. This is the report Lise said earlier.
Iran's state TV, the studio where the supreme leader's speeches are aired, but not today. Not after Israel attacked it. Forcing the newsreader to flee, her desk devoured by fire. Today, a fiery message of his own from the Ayatollah, said to have sheltered in a bunker during the war.
Iran, with its iron national resolve, rejects surrender. For a country like this, the idea of surrender is laughable to anyone who truly knows the Iranian nation.
For now, a fragile ceasefire. Tehran starts to look like itself. Its infamous traffic, its beautiful bazaars. Residents slowly returning to a city they left to escape the bombs. But for some, it's still a battle, just to breathe. In this ward, there are civilians, not soldiers. Murtaza shows his scars. He was working in the transport department when the entrance to the notorious Evin prison was bombed.
Israel زندانو زد. من اونجا بودم.
Israel lies, saying they are only hitting military and nuclear sites. They hit a prison. I was there. I was hurt. And I'm amazed countries like England, France, the US and the UN don't condemn Israel.
The abandoned American embassy, a monument to Iran's troubled relationship with the West, accused of sponsoring terrorism, of trying to develop a nuclear bomb. Charges Tehran denies. But even inside this former embassy, a cafe serving iced Americanos. Amir tells me he wants to see a better relationship between America and Iran. So many Iranians do. But in this dark time, there's still not much light. The message in public was defiant, but this blackened studio symbolizes this dark moment in Iran, the most difficult and dangerous decisions confronting the supreme leader, the most fateful choices in his nearly 40 years in power. A new, uncertain chapter in an old, long-standing war. Lise Doucette, BBC News, Tehran.
Well, Lise joined us live from Tehran a short while ago, and she told us it's still unclear just how much damage was done to Iran's nuclear facilities.
Well, as we've been reporting on the news, there's been so many different assessments coming from different capitals. The United States continues to use the exact description, starting with President Trump, who in the immediate aftermath of those unprecedented strikes on Iran's three main facilities talked about how the American bombs had obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Then you had the intelligence assessment saying it was more limited, that it had only been set back a few months. And then yesterday, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, made his first speech since President Trump announced a ceasefire, accused the United States of exaggerating the extent of the damage. Perhaps the clearest assessment came from the foreign minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, who did say there had been serious damage. But the big question everyone is asking is just how far does that damage go? And the question the rest of the world is asking is in what way and how soon can Iran resume the nuclear enrichment?
That was Lise Doucette speaking to us a little bit earlier. Well, let's speak to our correspondent Dan Johnson, who's in Jerusalem. Dan, we heard a defiant tone from Iran's supreme leader around, 18 hours ago. But today, hearing from the foreign minister that serious damage was caused. How close will we ever get to knowing the truth of how much Iran's nuclear program has been set back?
It's really difficult to see if we'll ever get firm evidence or clear answers on that. Iran is at the moment subject to monitoring and inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, but there have been moves since this conflict in the Iranian parliament for Iran to drop out of IAEA monitoring. So in terms of how that's going to be observed in the future, how Israel, the Americans and the rest of the world is going to reassure itself that Iran isn't rebuilding its nuclear program, that is something that'll have to be negotiated and agreed. And at the moment, the Iranians are saying they won't participate in those talks until they themselves have a full assessment of exactly what the level of damage is. So in the meantime, you've got this war of words and this fight to control the narrative over exactly what has happened here, and it may not in reality actually matter what happened on the ground. The Israeli leadership is trying to tell its people that this conflict was justified and worthwhile, that the US strikes were necessary and that they have achieved their aim. The Iranians are trying to tell their own people that their nation isn't weakened and that they could rebuild their nuclear program if indeed they choose to, although they maintain that is not in pursuit of nuclear weapons, it's just for nuclear power. The rhetoric's completely swapped over if we go back 2 weeks to the start of this conflict, when the Israelis were saying that the Iranians posed an existential threat. The Iranians were saying nothing to worry about, we're of no threat, there's nothing to be concerned about here. Now you've got the Americans and the Israelis saying that the threat has been neutralized, but the Iranians maintain they could potentially rebuild their nuclear program.
Dan, thank you. That's our correspondent Dan Johnson in Jerusalem for us. The United States is to give $30 million in funding to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a US and Israeli-backed body set up to distribute aid in Gaza. It's the first known direct US funding for the group. The GHF, backed by armed US contractors and Israeli troops, has been operating in the Strip since the end of May, following an 11-week aid blockade by Israel. On Tuesday, the UN said more than 400 Palestinians had been killed in recent weeks by the Israeli military while trying to collect food at the distribution sites. Well, let's speak to our Gaza correspondent, Rushdie Abu-Alouf, who's in Cairo for us. Rushdie, just explain why we're seeing the level of casualties, according to the UN and other sources, at these distribution sites, because it's to do with how concentrated the crowds are around them, because there are just 4 main sites, aren't there?
Yeah, and all of them are in the south, not in the north, where half of the population exists. You know, in the south, they have 4 distribution centers, 2 in Rafah, 1 in Khan Yunis, and 1 in the middle camps. And it's all in an area under Israeli security control. So there is always a presence of Israeli troops around, not inside the centers. And we see every night thousands of people. They gather, they queue, and then they push towards the center in under darkness where the troops are there. And every night we get report about Israeli drones and tanks open fire on the ground. When we did ask the people, why you go, why you risk your life, they always say, because we have no other alternative. They prefer the old mechanism of food distributing to their doorstep, or at least to their neighborhoods. And the only organization capable of doing this is the UN agencies, which the Americans are not supporting, and they prefer this new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
And Rushdie, just very briefly, what is the hope that that situation may improve for Gazans in desperate need of aid with this huge injection of funds from the US?
Well, from Gaza point of view and Palestine, the people who work in this organization, $30 million is very little comparing to what is needed. Each truck costs about $500,000, and Gaza needs 400, 500 trucks every day. So the people were appreciating, and any money given to Gaza, but this $30 million is considered very little to what is Gaza really need.
Rushdie, thank you. That's our correspondent, Rushdie Abu-Alouf, who's in Cairo, just confirming there that $30 million in funding coming from the US is not enough, really. It barely touches the sides, but it is the first known direct US funding for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're with BBC News. There's been a major U-turn by the UK government, which will make changes to its planned benefits reforms following a wave of pressure from Labour MPs. People who currently receive personal independence payments, or the health element of universal credit, will continue receiving what they currently get. Instead, planned cuts will only hit future claimants. The climb down comes after more than 120 MPs from the Prime Minister's own party publicly criticised the government's plans. Our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus reports.
Sir Keir Starmer saluted this week as he visited Royal Marines training in Holland. But it's his own troops among his backbenchers he's struggled to control, and who forced him into the most significant retreat of his premiership with this U-turn over key benefit cuts. More than 120 had said publicly they'd block his reforms to disability and sickness benefits.
When they say cut back, we say...
The original plan was to limit who receives some benefits and cut others to save £5 billion. Now, Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, has written to Rebel MPs saying there'll be no change for those currently receiving PIPs, no cuts for those currently receiving Universal Credit's health element. New claimants will face cuts, but support to help people back to work will be increased, and disability rights groups will be consulted on the reforms. Ms Kendall said, "We have listened to colleagues who support the principle of reform, but are worried about the impact of the pace of change."
These are really important changes and shows that how Labour supports the most vulnerable, and also this overall package is about helping people get into work, which is absolutely a core Labour value. I'm going to be backing it now because I think it is a good step forward, and making these major changes are very welcome, and I'm really delighted that the government's been listening.
In Ellesmere Port on the Wirral Peninsula, the original plan had left many deeply worried. Camille, who has epilepsy, gets PIP payments. Her husband, employment support allowance.
They're going on about getting rid of universal credit and cutting off PIP. We're going to struggle even more. And it's sad, because that is scary for me, and as well as other families around Ellesmere Port. we're all going to struggle.
Jill is registered blind. She says people fear losing help, but change is needed.
The welfare benefit system is very heavily used and spending huge amounts of money, which this country really can't afford. And also there are a lot of people getting those benefits that perhaps shouldn't be. And it must be a terrible juggling act for people to try and stop all the cheats, make sure that people with genuine need are getting the benefits that they are entitled to.
The Conservatives say the government's U-turn and failure to get welfare spending under control will come at a cost, likely higher taxes. The Liberal Democrats that a grubby deal will still hurt disabled people. But the government says its aim is to reduce the anxieties of those worried about the changes and put the benefit system on a sustainable footing. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent in Westminster, Leila Nathu. Leila, this is yet another climb down after the government's U-turn on winter fuel. What does it say about Keir Starmer's government's judgment?
Well, it's a massive blow for Keir Starmer's authority, no doubt about that. This rebellion was a long time brewing. There were many representations privately and then more publicly. And I think there will be some reflection in Number 10 about how it came to this 11th hour compromise ahead of the vote on Tuesday. In the event, we got this deal last night that the government hopes will be enough to persuade a lot of the more than 120 Labour MPs who had opposed the changes. And they say they are now confident that this bill will proceed as planned through Parliament on Tuesday, coming before the Commons and MPs for a vote on Tuesday. That is what the critics had tried to derail. So they've offered these concessions, essentially protecting existing benefit claimants and bringing forward some money for employment support and then involving disabled people in future reforms. Those were some of the key asks. But there are already some Labour MPs who are saying, look, this isn't enough. We are still concerned enough not to support the bill. And I think that there is that short-term imperative of just trying to get this legislation through. But then there are longer-term implications because this bill was designed to save £5 billion by 2030. If they have softened some of these measures, there is going to be money needed to be found from elsewhere by the Treasury. So Rachel Reeves has to get those sums done now. And then there are wider questions for Number 10, both backwards looking in terms of how they got to this stage and what they could have done differently to avoid this coming to a head in this way. But also now they are facing a noisy, confident bunch of Labour backbenchers who are seemingly organised enough to mount this kind of challenge to the Prime Minister. How do they go forward with potentially difficult policies in the future?
Leila Nathu from Westminster, our political correspondent, thank you. Well, let's speak to the Labour MP, Nadia Whittome, who joins us now from Westminster. Thank you for joining us. So the MP who led the opposition to these proposals says that the revised bill is actually a good step forward. What's your response?
I have enormous respect for Meg and for my colleagues who led the recent amendment. It was the right thing to do. But I'm very clear that these revised proposals are nowhere near enough and actually would create a two-tier benefit system in PIP and the universal credit health element, where we have a situation where someone with the same disability and the same level of need doesn't get PIP just because they became disabled at a later date, or gets less money in the universal credit health element because they became disabled at a later date. If you're, say, somebody with a fluctuating or degenerative condition, like if you're someone with arthritis who doesn't need PIP or the universal credit health element now, but knows that you'll probably need it in the future, that's not going to be any comfort to you. If you're a parent of a disabled child who knows that their child is likely to need PIP in the future, again, that's not going to be any comfort to you. And
many
everybody
MPs
should be extremely
sorry to jump in. It's just we've got limited time. Many MPs have said that the welfare bill or the welfare system needs reforming, and the cost of health and disability benefits was £28 billion in the year before the pandemic and is now £52 billion a year and is forecast to rise further. What do you think should be done about that?
Of course, the welfare system needs reform. Nobody would say that.
But how would you see it? How would you see it reformed then?
Nobody would say that more strongly than disabled people themselves. But in fact, welfare spending overall has not significantly increased as a percentage of GDP. Health and disability-related benefits have, and the way that you deal with that is tackling the root causes and investing in things like the NHS, housing, councils. But everybody should be extremely worried about these cuts because anybody could become disabled at any point in their lives, and that's why everyone needs this safety net. And these cuts, this bill that is being rushed through Parliament, does not provide that.
Why do you think there is such an increase in the number of people claiming disability benefits for mental or behavioural health conditions? Because that increased from 2002 to 2024 from 360,000 to 1.28 million, and at its current trajectory is forecast to rise further.
Well, I think it's quite clear what the causes of that are. We've had over a decade of austerity. We know that there's a correlation between health and poverty, including mental health. It's been well documented by clinicians and experts, and we know what we need to do to tackle that problem. Unfortunately, government, that is going to cost money, and we know that the bottom line here is that the government wants to make savings.
So how would you find those savings then? Would you put taxes up, presumably?
Taxing. I've been arguing for wealth taxes. So these cuts would save £3 billion by pushing people into poverty. If we had a 2% tax on assets over 10 million, that would raise 8 times as much. It would raise £24 billion a year. That's just one example. There are other examples of wealth taxes, like equalising capital gains and income tax. The Chancellor could adjust the fiscal rules.
Well, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you so much. Labour MP Nadia Whittome, thank you for joining us from Westminster.
Thank you.
And you can find out a lot more about the changes to the welfare cuts being proposed on the BBC News website. A teenager from Norfolk has become the first person in Europe to receive a new medication which doctors believe could cure her life-threatening immune disorder. By the time she reached 19, several members of Mary Catchpole's family had died, including her mother and grandmother, as a result of the inherited condition known as APDS. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, explains.
All her life, Mary has carried the burden of a rare disease that killed her mother, grandmother, aunt and uncle. Now that weight has lifted, the 19-year-old feels liberated.
So I just hope it will give me a new lease of life. It's really just a miracle. It means everything. It's bittersweet because obviously my family members who passed away before, they could have it. And it's brought me new hope and new joy about my life, and it makes me feel like I can just do anything.
Mary's ultra-rare condition is called APDS and makes her highly vulnerable to infection. But she's the first patient in Europe to get a transformative new drug. Leniolisib, also called Joenja, should stabilise Mary's immune system by blocking the faulty gene which causes APDS. It has a list price of £352,000 a year, but the NHS has agreed a substantial confidential discount.
So here we're looking at a CT scan of a chest scan of Mary.
APDS can cause lung damage and trigger blood cancers. Mary's consultant at Addenbrooke's Hospital hopes the new drug will prevent that.
It's extremely significant. We have a treatment that's targeted specifically for the disease. So that in itself is absolutely transformative and amazing. The future is that she potentially has a drug that leads to a cure, and it's a simple tablet.
Mary's mother was just 43 when she died. Other affected family members also died prematurely.
She died quite young, which was always a fear that I'd die young too. But with this medication, I know I can have a longer life, which is what she'd want.
Mary's dad feared he'd lose her too.
To know that that is possibly the future for your daughter was really gut-wrenching. But this is giving her a chance to just live a normal life and have a family herself if she wants to. It's wonderful.
Mary's family played a crucial role in pinpointing the genetic origins of APDS by providing blood samples for researchers at Addenbrooke's. This is the lab at the University of Cambridge where the faulty gene which triggers APDS was discovered in 2013. To have an effective licensed treatment just 12 years later is astonishingly fast. The drug is one of several new targeted treatments which are helping to transform the lives of patients with rare diseases. It's thought up to 50 APDS patients in England could benefit from the drug Mary is taking, a treatment which is giving her a sense of independence.
I want to go on more adventures and take risks and just find me without the illness, if that makes sense, because all I've ever known is medication, needles, hospital appointments, whereas now I can find out who I am truly.
Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Nice to hear about positive news developments, isn't it? Headlines coming up. Stay with us here on BBC News. This is BBC News. I'm Laxmi Gopal. Your headlines. Iran acknowledges that serious damage was done to its nuclear facilities during the US and Israeli bombings. Washington approves $30 million of funding for a controversial US and Israeli-backed group set up to deliver aid in Gaza. The DRC and Rwanda are expected to sign an historic deal to end decades of brutal fighting. As you've been hearing, the battle of narratives between Washington and Tehran over US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites continues. Here's our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
Under the cover of night, these American B-2 bombers left Missouri to fly all the way to Iran and back in one 36-hour mission. They successfully hit their targets, but an early preliminary intelligence assessment has enraged Donald Trump, as it says they may not have damaged Iran's nuclear sites as much as he claimed this weekend.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
He ordered the Pentagon to give a presentation today that was supposed to demonstrate how much damage the bunker buster bombs had done. Video of a weapons test demonstrated how the massive ordnance penetrator can pierce solid rock to reach underground facilities. It took 15 years to perfect these weapons, specifically designed with Iran's nuclear sites in mind. The first bomb dropped on the underground complex in Fordo broke through a concrete cap installed to protect the site. 11 more bombs fell precisely down ventilation shafts and exploded.
The pilots stated, quote, "This was the brightest explosion that I've ever seen. It literally looked like daylight."
But there was no new evidence of how much damage had been done or whether enriched uranium had been moved before the attack.
If you want to know what's going on at Fordo, you better go there and get a big shovel, because no one's under there right now. No one's under there able to assess, and everyone's using reflections of what they see.
Israel says the airstrikes destroyed the critical infrastructure at the Fordo site. The International Atomic Energy Agency says the centrifuges are no longer operational. Even the Iranian government admits its nuclear installations have been badly damaged. These returning pilots should be treated as heroes, says the Defence Secretary, accusing the press of undermining them personally by quoting from a leaked intelligence assessment. Now their mission is accomplished, their political masters are at war with the media about how the outcome is being reported. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Japan has executed a death row inmate for the first time in 3 years. Takahiro Shiraishi was arrested in 2017 after body parts were found in his flat. He was sentenced to death for murdering 9 people, mostly young women. The 34-year-old was dubbed the Twitter killer after he admitted to approaching his victims on the social media platform. The BBC's Shaima Khalil reports from Tokyo.
The case of Takahiro Shiraishi, the man known here in Japan as the Twitter killer, shocked this country and for years gained so much media and public attention. The Justice Minister, who today issued the execution order, said that the bereaved families and the victims themselves suffered beyond imagination. Details of this case are very distressing and they involve suicidal victims. It all came into light in 2017 when police were searching for a woman who turned out to be one of his victims. Her dismembered body was found in his flat near Tokyo. Shiraishi then admitted to killing 9 people. They were suicidal victims whom he was in contact with on Twitter, now known as X. He told them that he could help them die, and in some cases claimed that he would kill himself alongside them. 9 dismembered bodies were found in cooler boxes and in toolboxes in his house. Local media here described it as the House of Horrors. During his trial, the prosecution asked for his execution. His defense team, however, asked for a more lenient sentence, citing murder by consent. And what was remarkable during the trial is that the killer himself, Shiraishi, contradicted his defense team and said that he killed those victims without consent. These murders pushed Twitter to change its rules, and it said that members should not discuss suicide or self-harm on the platform. When he was sentenced in 2020, hundreds of people came to watch the verdict. At the time, the judge described him as cunning and cruel and completely responsible for his murders. Today, he was executed, the first time that Japan enacts capital punishment in 3 years, in a case that has really stunned the nation and pushed a big debate on how suicide should be discussed online.
Our correspondent Shaima Khalil from Tokyo. Next week marks 1 year since Sir Keir Starmer entered number 10, and his first 12 months in office have generated plenty of headlines, well, as you've been seeing. Our chief political correspondent Henry Zeffman has been following the Prime Minister's progress.
And as Big Ben strikes 10, the exit poll is predicting a Labour landslide.
How did Sir Keir Starmer go from that to massive unpopularity? I've been trying to answer why the Prime Minister's political honeymoon faded so fast for a new Radio 4 programme, Starmer's Stormy Year. When I caught up with him recently in Kyiv, I asked the Prime Minister to reminisce about that exit poll moment.
I was sitting on a settee with Vic, my wife, and our 2 kids. I wanted to be with them. The moment the exit poll came through was an incredible moment. I was conscious of the sense of responsibility that would bring, and what my role would be, and what I must do to rise to the challenge.
But was the Labour Party really ready?
Well, and he was to get that perspective.
In his first interview about those early days, that's what I asked Simon Case, until recently the head of the civil service.
There were some elements where not enough thinking had been done. There were some areas where the Prime Minister and his team, and including me as his sort of core team, knew what we wanted to do, but we weren't communicating that effectively across all of government.
Any Prime Minister and any government would have struggled with what they inherited.
I don't think there are many incoming Prime Ministers who'd faced such challenging circumstances.
Once inside Downing Street, things only got bleaker for Labour.
We have inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion.
Frankly, things will get worse before they get better.
The start of a summer where the nation was on edge. This spawned one of the major attacks on Starmer from the right, the idea these rioters were treated more harshly than others. Two-tier Keir. Starmer's Attorney General, giving me his first broadcast interview, says this.
What some people were seeking to do, bringing up two-tier, was to make a comparison with the way that people were being treated for trying to kill police officers, and I want to reiterate that, kill police officers, with the response to protests on the streets of London. It's frankly disgusting to start to draw those type of comparisons.
The Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister will no longer accept donations for clothing.
As summer became autumn, new problems accumulated with remarkable speed. Simon Case thinks Starmer was naive about those gifts. For some in the public, it was worse than that. The Prime Minister sacked his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, after 3 months of bitter briefing which threatened to engulf his government, to the frustration of one former Cabinet Minister.
You were reading the papers and you just thought, this sounds like the back end of Boris Johnson's government or Rishi Sunak's government. This doesn't sound like a Labour government with a historic mandate and a historic landslide. We should be all pulling in the same direction here, and instead we've immediately turned on each other, and that was really, really disappointing to see that culture had immediately been instilled at the heart of number 10.
And then...
Hey, look what happened. Is this crazy?
Everything changed.
Can I present a letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much.
This new PM had to adapt and fast on the world stage.
Starmer's deft handling of Trump gave the UK its most defined diplomatic role since Brexit. It sharpened his definition here at home too. But it came too late for many voters, some of them turning to other parties, including Nigel Farage's Reform UK.
Within weeks of the local elections, the government had ditched its winter fuel policy. A senior cabinet minister acknowledged to me how unpopular it had become.
If I'm being honest, I think the reaction to it since the decision was announced was probably stronger than we thought, and that it became this leitmotif or this real symbol, and that politics can be like that.
One mistake fixed, but the most serious political crisis yet, on welfare, came along soon after. It's been a difficult first year. The storm might only just be beginning.
Well, Henry joins me now. Henry, how does this week's welfare crisis reflect the themes of what we've seen over Starmer's first year in office?
Make no mistake, Laxmi, a big reason why Sir Keir Starmer had to back down over welfare is because that issue is such a serious issue for so many Labour MPs who simply feel they did not come into politics to cut welfare. But I think it was also about other things. It was about bad handling of his parliamentary colleagues over the course of the year. It was about a general election campaign which perhaps did not set up in enough detail what this government would do. Why is that? Well, you heard from Simon Case, the former head of the civil service there, pretty damning words that he believes in some areas, before they came into office, the Labour Party simply had not done enough thinking about what they would do in government.
So where does this leave the Prime Minister's authority going into his second year?
Massively weakened. Massively weakened. I mean, if you take the combined effect of the winter fuel U-turn, which you heard Pat McFadden talking about there, and then what the government has now done on welfare, well, you have to say that if you are a Labour rebel who's annoyed with something that the Labour government is doing, you just think you have to get enough of your colleagues together and push the government and they will fold. It's going to be a real challenge for Keir Starmer, first to stabilise the mood in the Labour Party, which is absolutely acrid right now, and then to find a way to reassert that authority.
Henry, thank you. That's our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Thanks for being with us here at BBC News. The gates have been open at Glastonbury for a couple of days, but the festival properly gets underway later today. Acts will take to the main stages for the first time, with the 1975 headlining on the Pyramid stage tonight, and BBC Radio 4 will also be making an appearance at the festival. Let's speak now to our culture reporter, Noor Nanji, who's there. Noor, I hope you've got your wellies on, and I hope you're all geared up and ready for some, I don't know, Radio 4 rave.
It's funny that you mentioned wellies, because actually it did rain quite a lot last night, but luckily it's dried out now. It's looking like a sunny weekend ahead. And yes, we are here at the UK's biggest festival. It is also one of the biggest music festivals in Europe. Glastonbury Festival has officially opened. It is today when the main stages will be opening, and thousands of people are already here. And in fact, we're expecting around 140,000 people to be here over the course of the weekend. And there's plenty for them to enjoy. There's of course loads of art, culture, but it's really about the music. We're expecting, as you said, the 1975. They are going to be headlining tonight. We also have Neil Young and also Olivia Rodrigo. They are the headliners, but there's also loads more in store. Now, one of the people who is here enjoying things is Anita Rani, who is presenter of Women's Hour, and she's going to be here for the weekend, which is really exciting. What are you most looking forward to see?
Well, first of all, as soon as we finish talking, I'm going to go downstairs, sit at the picnic table and get ready to present Women's Hour live. And the programme, we've got an interview with Self-Esteem. We've got an incredible country singer called Tiff Merritt who's going to be performing live for us. And Jam Supernova is going to be talking to us about someone I'm very excited to see, is Doechii. Doechii is performing live. So we'll be discussing about her meteoric rise in the last year, discussing women in hip-hop. And then later on tonight, Noor, I'm going to hot-foot it over to the Park stage to see Self-Esteem play live. Also, personally, very excited to see, and this is definitely going to age me, En Vogue. And then from En Vogue, and this is the thing about Glastonbury, as you know, and if you, the thing is, even if you see it on TV, even if you're here in person, you can't quite grasp just how big this place is. The scale is enormous. So I'm going to hot-foot it from En Vogue and then make a mad dash from West Holtz to the other stage, or Pyramid, to see Alanis Morissette. So that's my evening lined up, all going to plan.
Well, some really great choices in there. I mean, I can't wait to see Doechii myself as well. But I think that's also part of the festival. You've got to be moving around, trying to dash from one stage to another. But you've been here before. What is it about Glastonbury that's so special that brings people back here again and again?
There is something. See, even now when I walk around, it's getting your head around the fact that this incredible man, Michael Eavis, 55 years ago, had this vision to turn his dairy farm into a place where people could come and experience music and spread peace and love. And the minute you enter this site, there is just a feeling. That feeling comes out of everyone's pores. It's full of joy, it's full of freedom, and it's a weekend where grown adults who might have very serious lives and, you know, wear a suit to work every day can dress in sparkles and be children for an entire weekend. It is a place of pure expression and freedom, and that feeling of just not having a care in the world, and you sort of leave the outside world over there and experience something completely different here. And the human interaction, that sense of community, you know, people talk to people, everyone smiles at people, and it is a really refreshing existence that you think, oh, why couldn't this happen in everyday life? Whatever's happening here, why don't we just do this all the time? So it's a really special place, and when the sun's shining, there's nowhere better.
Completely agree. And of course, just very quickly, the rumour mill is in overdrive about all these secret sets.
Yes.
Who do you think is going to be there?
Right, I think Pulp.
Ooh.
I think Pulp are going to make a comeback somewhere. I think there might be Patchwork. I'm really hoping. I think Lorde. Is there a rumour about Lorde something somewhere? I don't know. You probably know more than me, no. You're the woman on the inside who knows all the stuff. I'm just going to go with the flow. But if Pulp play and if they're Patchwork, very happy customer.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the festival. It sounds like you will. And there is so much more, as Anita's saying, over this weekend. I mean, because there's such a diverse lineup as well, and some of the things I'm really excited about seeing, there's a Bollywood queer night, there's Jamaican reggae. There's so much more than just what goes on the main stages. So we will be bringing you loads of coverage over the weekend.
Noor, thank you, and I'm glad the sun's come out as well after the rain. Enjoy. That's Noor Nanji at Glastonbury for us, and you can hear Women's Hour on BBC Radio or the BBC Sounds app if you're in the UK. And if you failed to get a ticket for Glastonbury, no worries. You can see coverage from the festival here on the BBC without having to, you know, camp or get involved in mud. There'll be live performances on BBC One, BBC Two and BBC Four, or you can follow it all on the BBC iPlayer. Plenty more on the BBC News website as well. But now let's turn our attention to a conflict in Central Africa and a peace deal that could bring an end to decades of violence involving the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. Their foreign ministers are in Washington, where they're expected to sign officially an historic deal today to end fighting in the mineral-rich border region. President Trump took credit for the deal and said his administration had stopped a very vicious war. Well, let's speak to our senior Africa correspondent, Anne Soy, who's in Nairobi for us. Anne, how much credit goes to the US president for this?
Well, when you look at the role that it is playing, it is critical, but it's also borrowed a lot from a lot of the mediation of effort that has been going on in the region, brokered by regional leaders like the Angolan president, and also lately by Qatar. And so they're borrowing bits from the different deals that were being discussed, mediated by those two countries and the East African region as well, and then putting them together and hoping that finally they're going to have a solution to this unending conflict.
After this many decades of violence, what has changed? What's been the stumbling block that's been overcome to get to the position of a peace deal?
Well, the biggest challenge at the moment in Eastern DRC, the mineral-rich region, has been that M23 made a resurgence at the end of 2022 and has been taking over swathes of territory. This year, they seized two major cities at the border region, the city of Goma and Bukavu. And therefore, the Congolese government has been under immense pressure to bring an end to that conflict. But then it's complicated also by the role of Rwanda from across the border, which has been accused of backing the M23 rebels, who now control parts of that region, and who are also alleged to have boots on the ground. They are alleged to have sent their own troops into Congolese territory. So we expect that this deal is going to address the issues of respect for territorial integrity, the withdrawal of Rwandan troops from Congolese soil, and the laying down of arms by the rebel groups, M23, as well as a rebel group that Rwanda has been saying is working alongside the Congolese forces, the Forces for the Democratic Liberation of Rwanda. So it has been a long process, and this is the closest it has gotten to finding a solution. People are really holding their breaths and hoping that it will hold.
Well, Anne, thank you. That's our senior Africa correspondent, Anne Soy, speaking to us from Nairobi. The home of the Hollywood actor Brad Pitt has been ransacked by thieves. LA police said 3 suspects entered the property through the front window. Mr. Pitt was in the UK earlier this week for the premiere of his new film, F1. You're watching BBC News.
This is the entrance of the cave for the Mayas. We're going into the body of the monster of the earth. And you can see the fangs are the stalactites.
And this water, so clear.
This cave was first discovered and mapped in 2015, and many kilometres still lay undiscovered.
This is simply breathtaking. Some of the clearest blue water, and these stalagmites on top of me. Unreal. Amazing, isn't it? Putting it lightly, mate. Oh.
It's an hour through darkness and crystal clear water, travelling just 300 metres till we finally arrive at our destination.
You see this?
Yeah. What is that?
Those are the columns or pillars from the Tren Maya here in the caves.
That is from the Tren Maya?
Yes. They put 15,000 of these. They are huge. They are made of concrete and steel, but they are corroding.
Ah, yeah, I see.
Polluting the water that reached the reef.
Let me see. Oh, come closer. Ah, it's all over my hands, and this water that was really clear isn't.
Yes.
What kind of impact do these columns have on the water here and all of these structures?
It's really bad. When they broke the ceiling, they changed the environment of the cave. They make it drier. But the big problem of this is that this water is going to reach the coral reef. All of this water goes to the Caribbean Sea and will affect the turtles, the coral reef, the fishes, and in the end, to the environment and to us. They thought that this was going to help the southeast of Mexico for the development, but if we don't take care of the environment, in the end, we will lose everything. We will lose the environment, the health of the people, the health of the economy, and we lose everything. So we need to be very careful when we do anything in places like this that are so fragile.
What are your thoughts then about the Tren Maya?
It sounded like a good idea in the beginning. Now we need to learn the lesson and try to preserve everything that we have left, the caves, the jungle, as healthy as we can for the future generations.
I'm really shocked to see this. I mean, that's going into people's drinking water. It actually makes me quite sad. And I can totally understand why the likes of Roberto and others are getting angry about this when you see the damage that is being caused.
The Travel Show, your essential guide wherever you're heading. Every weekend on BBC News.